show you how to make lap harp sheet music. I would recommend watching this video all the way through instead of pausing it and following along. I think if you have a better idea of what the finished product is supposed to be like, that you'll have an easier time getting there. For reference, regular sheet music looks something like this, and lap harp sheet music looks something like this. With regular sheet music, we just put it in front of us and we read it and we play our instrument. The cool thing about lap harp sheet music is that you can actually slide it under the strings of the instrument and you can read it without looking away from your instrument, so it's great for beginners. Regardless of your skill level, I think that making lap harp sheet music is fun, so I'm going to show you how to get started on that. The first step is to choose an appropriate song. This kind of depends on the size of your lap harp. A fairly standard lap harp ranges about 2 octaves. It's maybe around a foot long, and so you have to fit all of the music onto a page this size. The typical lap harp is also diatonic, which means that the only notes you can play are those within a particular scale. Basically, the pieces that tend to work best for lap harp are folk music and vocal music. First, you'll want to cut out a piece of paper. If you already have some lap harp sheet music, you can just trace that onto a new sheet of paper. If not, you'll have to measure the length between these 2 metal bars. It doesn't have to be perfect. A lot of the paper that I have isn't actually as long as my lap harp, so I have these straight edges here instead of just continuing with the same line. Really, the only part of your lap harp that you need to line up is the very top, because that's the part that keeps the sheet music in place. A thick piece of white paper tends to work best. A single sheet of printer paper will also work, but I prefer 2 pieces of printer paper taped together. Now cut out your paper and slide it under the strings of the lap harp to see if it fits. If it fits pretty well, you're ready to go on to the next part. Remove the paper from the lap harp and set it on a flat surface. With a pencil, lightly write in the time signature at the far left of the paper. Place your piece of paper under the strings and then position yourself so that you're directly over the strings. Lightly put dots where the notes are going to go. When you're reading lap harp sheet music, you have to be directly over the strings so that the notes line up with the strings. When you make your dots, sit directly over the strings and try to make the dots line up with the strings. Do this step very lightly, because the more familiar you get with the process, the more you're probably going to want to erase something and start over. Something to keep in mind is that when you're at the edges, you don't have access to the high notes. So if your song has mostly been notes down here and suddenly your last note's way up here, you can just write it up here and then add arrows going to it later. Or you have to plan these notes a little better so that the high notes fit perfectly. If you do have to erase something, erase it fully so that you don't get confused when you go back and make new dots. If the notes are ascending or descending, you can write the next note right on top or below the previous note. It's only if you have notes that are the same pitch or frequently jump up and down, like in an arpeggio, that you need to space them out. Otherwise, you probably want to err on the side of conserving space. Once you have everything spaced out the way that you want it to, remove the paper from under the strings and in black pen draw the note values and stems. Make sure that the pencil dots that you made are the exact center of the note heads. Otherwise, the pitches might look unclear. Then in blue pen, before the first note, draw an arrow leading to it. That way you know that it's the first note. Then draw arrows or lines going to the next notes. Be very careful when you're writing these lines, because if you get it wrong, it could be very confusing. If you're worried, you could do the direction part in pencil first, then try playing it on your lap harp to verify that everything sounds right, and then go over it in pen. At this point, I like to go over the time signature in pen and also write the title of the song at the bottom of the page and maybe the genre or composer at the bottom right of the page. I also like writing these pencil slashes to show where the bar lines are, and that makes counting a little bit easier. Hopefully you chose a simple enough song at the beginning that you're not coming across any major problems. There are a few problems with making lap harp sheet music, but I found a couple of workarounds. So the first problem is that it's hard to show double stops or chords. Basically, if you're playing 2 notes at once, it can be difficult to see how they're supposed to line up. So my solution to that is anytime I have 2 notes that I'm supposed to be playing at once, I make sure that the note heads are lined up exactly vertically on the page, and then I do a squiggly line to connect them instead of just a straight line that shows the direction of the notes. It can also be helpful to make this line in the same color as the note heads. If you're transcribing piano music, you might have both a right and a left hand playing at the same time, and you can notate that in your lap harp sheet music. So in this example, I had a really simple left hand part and a really simple right hand part, and they both stayed in their own octaves. So at the start, I just wrote LH for left hand and RH for right hand, and that seemed to work just fine. Sometimes we have note values that don't really fit into our time signature. Like in this example, I have triplets in 3/4 time. So you can do the same thing that you do in regular sheet music and just have a little line going over the notes and whatever number you need. So in this case, I needed triplets, so I have a line going over 3 notes and a 3 over it. Also, don't be afraid to just do written directions in the music. Sometimes it's easier to just write what you want to happen on the page rather than try to notate it somehow. Really, just do whatever's clearer. Now all that's left to do is play it and see if it turned out okay.